Namaste, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to NDTV World. It is a pleasure. There's a lot of things going on in the United States of America, and it is an absolute pleasure to welcome Congressman Greg Landsman, who represents Ohio's 1st Congressional District. Congressman Landsman has been recognized for his pragmatic leadership, his focus on community-driven solutions, which is very, very apt right now, I would say. Before joining Congress, he served on the Cincinnati City Council, where he led major education and economic initiatives. And since being elected to Washington, he's continued that very focus, working on issues of fiscal responsibility, innovation, as well as strengthening America's partnerships at home and abroad. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today. And let's get right into it, because I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the shutdown, the biggest thing that's been making headlines literally all over the world. It's finally come to an end after over 6 weeks. Many Americans are very frustrated, not just at how long it's taken for this one. This was the longest one in history, but just by how routine these sort of disruptions come. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm right there with him in terms of being frustrated. This has been an issue since the late 90s. So when I was growing up, I mean, I'm sort of a product of the 90s. And one of the things I got into that made me get into politics was sort of just the nature of problem solving back then. Obviously, it was political and, it wasn't perfect, but one of the biggest transformative bills was a budget bill in 1993, which was Bill Clinton's first budget. And it was a big change in terms of the tax code and what we were investing in. And it led to, the largest economic expansion in American history.
That's right.
And then, things started to get really political and partisan. And Newt Gingrich, I think, was a big part of that. And they tried to impeach him. And really, that was the last time we've had really solid budgets. So since 1997, we've only passed 4 budgets.
Yep.
The rest have been continuing resolutions, which is, as you know, it's just a way of saying, okay, we're not going to pass a budget, but we will keep spending at the current level for another year.
Yep.
And it speaks to a dysfunction that exists in Washington and in the United States Congress, where the two sides are really struggling to work together, and where we haven't had the kind of presidential leadership that can bring a divided House and a divided Senate together and say, look, yes, I understand that everyone has picked their teams, but we're all Americans and we're going to pass an American budget. We're going to pass a tax code that, that won't get every Democrat, won't get every Republican, but,
I'm glad that you made that point, because some argue, I mean, a lot of people are arguing, and I think it's become very obvious to the public as well, that shutdowns have become more political theater, political leverage, rather than fiscal accountability. And it's not just President Trump, right? It's every president essentially has dealt with a shutdown while he's been in power. What do you think is the solution for this? Do you think that Congress should essentially reform how the federal budget process works? There have been some suggestions by a few congressmen, by a few senators. But, an example is probably automatic continuing solutions. What do you think is the solution here? Because it just seems that it's very obvious to even the general public now that, is this just political theater going on? Or is it actually, as you said, we're all Americans. It doesn't matter, Democrat or Republican. Everyone's affected by a shutdown.
Everyone's affected in one way or the other. And the way it gets covered, and the way so many politicians engage in it, is like, who's winning? Who's winning the shutdown fight? And it's so hard to watch, especially as somebody who's in it and trying to get to a solution. Like I like problem solving. It's one of the reasons I got into politics. I like solving really complicated issues. And this one wasn't hugely complicated. It was a matter of keeping the government open and extending these healthcare subsidies. So it wasn't even that tough a negotiation, but I think people sort of locked into their sides and said, look, we want to win this thing, which is such a disservice to their country, in my opinion, and the people who rely on them making good decisions, federal workers, people who rely on food assistance, housing, and of course these tax credits. I think the change is really more leadership. You're going to have people who run and lead in a way that gets us sort of past this hyper partisan nature of American politics.
Right.
And maybe we went so far that somebody who really is going to pull us back together can win, or a bunch of us like that can win. But yeah, there are some changes. I'm working on a bill to try to force a vote to say, look, during a shutdown, you don't get paid as a member of Congress. I suspended my pay, others did, but like members of Congress still get paid. That's a small thing, but I'm gonna try to put it on.
They're gonna hurry up if they're not getting paid to come to a solution or to end the shutdown.
Yeah, and they'll say, well, some folks don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money, but guess who also doesn't have a lot of money? Their staffs, public employees. So that's one. I also think the rule, I'd love to see the next speaker adopt a set of rules that leads to more bipartisan work. Right now, if the speaker goes too far in a bipartisan direction, only one member or a couple members of their party can trigger a revote on that speaker.
Right.
And that's a huge problem. So I think that's a big change that needs to be made in the next rules package. I know this is going to sound small, but in committee, everyone sits on separate sides. So in every committee room, the Democrats sit on one side and Republicans sit on the other side, and nobody gets to know each other. And there's just the snickering and sort of one-upsmanship that goes on. And but there are much more substantive reforms, but there are things that we can do.
That could be a small thing, small, easy things, quick fix to maybe bigger problems. That was my next question. How do you, you spoke a little bit about it, but how do you maintain bipartisanship in an era of such deep division, especially when I would even argue governance itself seems a bit hostage to political brinksmanship?
Yeah. I think part of it is you gotta stick to what you believe, right? Like, so this is hopefully just a moment in time. You can't get swallowed by it. That's number one. You can't get pulled into the chaos and the performative nature, the brinkmanship nature of politics right now. Two, I think you got to lay out a vision for change. I mean, we're releasing early next week our vision for how to fundamentally fix the things that are broken in this country, from the economy to politics to our democracy to healthcare to housing, and hopefully a positive vision that is not partisan. It's obviously more people on the left of the political spectrum will look at this and say, oh, this is a great plan, but there's stuff where people in the middle or even on the right would say, oh, this is a unifying governing document. Ultimately, I think voters should push their members to get off social media. Like, they can post and be part of, using those platforms to tell people what they're doing. But I think a big problem is that so many of these politicians on both sides are on social media all the time, and they get pulled into that absurdness and away from their constituents, and where the vast majority, most Americans, are still in the middle. And, I think if you are off those platforms and just doing interviews and being in your community with your constituents, you'll stay in the middle. You may be on the left side of the middle or the right side of the middle, but somewhere in the middle. If you spend all your time online, you're going to get pulled to the extremes.
One way or the other, right? Extreme left or extreme right. But let's get away from the politicians a little bit. Now that the shutdown's over, and this is not, it's not an end, I would say. It's just, until January 30th, we're going to open up again. But the main issues of this shutdown essentially remain unresolved. But what do you say? We'll just have to see what happens, I guess, at the beginning of next year. But What do you say to the federal workers and the families, especially in Ohio, who bore the brunt of the shutdown? You mentioned, specifically Congressmen get paid, but it is mainly the staff. It is the other people that bear the brunt.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to them financially, emotionally? It's been how many days? 43, 44-day shutdown? It's over 6 weeks.
Yeah, almost 50, if not 50. I mean,
Almost 50, yep.
One of the reasons I suspended my pay was because I wanted to make sure federal workers knew that, like, at least I could do was be in solidarity with them in terms of my paycheck. And I'm shocked that not every member does this and that we still get paid. Again, I think that's got to be something that changes. And so we're going to push for that in the interim.
Okay.
Right. So that people know, like, hey, look, you're heading towards another shutdown at the end of January. And you should put your money where your mouth is. If you don't want a shutdown or you think people should not have their pay, then let's vote on it now. Let's change the rules now so that none of you get paid if we shut down again. Two, we've got to resolve the healthcare issue. I mean, that was my big fight, is getting these tax credits resolved. And so, we're going to have to all dig in on that and get a deal done. I'm part of a group working hopefully with the Senate to get a resolution to extend the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And then I do think that for Democrats, they need to, if they're going into negotiations, they have to be crystal clear as to what they want and put it out there.
Okay.
Because if extending the healthcare subsidies, that's where things landed. That's where I always was by 1 year, but that we didn't really sort of land that plane as a party until the end. So right now, I want to see Democrats say, going into the next one, we want X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Then for Republicans, they need to push on the president of the United States to do what every other president has done, which is to get in the game and negotiate. He has to work with the other side. Even though he goes on to, say all these things about how awful Democrats are and, we're terrible people. I don't actually think he believes that. But even if he does, you have to work. If in order to avoid a shutdown, you need votes from the minority party, which means you have to work with them. That's how we avoid falling off the cliff again at the end of January.
Do you feel that you just said a very interesting thing. I don't think that he believes it, but a lot of critics, a lot of the general public, a lot of our audiences here, they see it almost as appeasement politics. Is it just political theater, or is it that, and you've been there, you've seen the arguments about healthcare, you've seen why the shutdown has happened up close, you were there. What is the essential argument? Why is it getting unresolved, or why is it not getting resolved?
Which piece? The healthcare piece?
You tell me.
I mean, I think why there wasn't this negotiation, or because typically what's happened, this is my third year, but in my first couple of years, there were bipartisan agreements on getting the budget done. And, that one was a budget, one was a CR. And that was because, honestly, the majority believed that they knew they needed Democratic votes. And so they went ahead and negotiated something in advance. They put up a partisan thing as sort of a trial balloon, watched it pop, right? It didn't get the votes it needed. And then they said, oh, well, look, we tried, but we have to do this in a bipartisan way, which is the only way. And then we got a deal done. So that's really the biggest change, is that they didn't negotiate. Trump said, don't negotiate. So the speaker just put up a bill on the floor that had no input from Democrats. And then it went over to the Senate and nothing happened. There were no negotiations. And so after 50 days of trying, a few senators said, okay, if they're not going to negotiate, we got to end this. Right. And then on the Affordable Care Act subsidies, I think they really don't like it.
Well, that was one of his promises, right, when he got elected. So is it just that that's what I'm asking. Is it just that he's appeasing his base, or does he really believe that what
I think in this case, no, I don't think he. 80% of Americans like this, including a lot of his base, right? So they may not like Obamacare, but when it comes to their healthcare subsidies, they do want those, right?
Okay.
And so he knows it's an 80-20 issue. And yeah, there are people on their side of the fence that don't like the Obamacare part, that it's part of Obamacare. I honestly think that Trump didn't get engaged because I don't know. I think he thinks that's not really his role right now, that he's more of a global leader. He spent most of the time traveling abroad and messing around with these, and with this tariff game, because it is a game. There's no real strategy, in my opinion, behind it. It's killing my farmers. It's killing my small businesses. It's crushing families. It has made no sense economically. So I don't think he thinks he's really the kind of guy that should sit in a room and negotiate this stuff anymore.
Well, you stated that in the past that the recent shutdown that just happened was actually totally avoidable, right? And what you said right now, it seems like it was at least not 50 days, right? At least not this long. Was it primarily because Trump refused to work with the Democrats? And I have a follow-up question to that. Given that the Democrats do control a significant portion of the House, Senate, and the White House, how do you envision bipartisan accountability for preventing such shutdowns, like, I guess, future shutdowns, maybe even early next year, because we're still living in the Trump era?
Yeah. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. We don't control anything, right? So like we have, they need our votes in the Senate to get to 60, right? Because they only have 53 members, but they have a majority in the House and the Senate and the White House. The biggest change is that, like I said, they have to be willing to work with Democrats, and they can do that on their own. They don't need Trump to work with Democrats. The Speaker and John Thune can do that on their own. Thune has, in the Senate, has been more likely interested in sort of working with the other side. The Speaker just won't do it. I think the politics in his caucus allow him to just sort of, do nothing. I mean, he like Trump didn't do anything. He just sat in DC. He didn't have his members come in. He shut the House floor down. That was the first time last night when we got on the House floor. I guess it was yesterday at 4:00. That was the first time we had been on the House floor, any of us, in almost 6 weeks.
What is your strategy for the Democratic caucus to respond when Trump aligned members? I mean, if Trump is not playing any role in this, he's busy traveling, as you said, but what is your strategy going forward to respond when Trump aligned members that you do have to work with seek to block legislation that you support? What's the strategy going forward?
I think it's really important for folks to appreciate that this was avoidable and unnecessary and very painful. Neither side should be eager to do this again, ever. It will be really important for everyone to be willing to just work together. I think it will help if Democrats are clear about what needs to be true in order to support a budget or a continuing resolution at the end of January. That will help. Democrats were very clear in the sense that it was about health care, but like, where was the line? Right. And I think you have to put, one or two very specific things on the table, and then negotiate and get what you can. Just because the Democrats are clearer, or if we go in there and we just say it's just these 2 or 3 things and it's very specific, doesn't mean they're going to actually negotiate, which is a real problem long term. Right.
And it's scary to think about what's going to happen January 30th going forward. But hopefully, I think both sides should recognize, or it's important, as you say, to recognize that post January 30th, we need to realize, look, a 50-day shutdown is not practical. I mean, everyone loses, and there has to be some kind of progress going forward. We can't veer into another shutdown of even 10 days, 20 days, 5 days. It's not focused on any solution then at that point in time. But my last question to you is, you represent a district with, I would say, a growing Indian American community.
Great.
And you have emphasized US India engagement. And I asked this because you just mentioned Trump is traveling around. But given Trump's trade and tariff policies, which are still, I guess, ongoing all over the world, but some of them certainly are aimed at India and other partners, what message do you have to the Indian American community, not just in your constituency, but I would say probably all across the country?
Yeah, I mean, we have a huge, vibrant Indian community. It's and they've been so good to me, and I've it's just one of my favorite parts of the job is my district and my constituents, and I love our community, our Indian American community. They really have been just so good to me and my family. The partnership is a huge one. I mean, India is one of our most significant allies. There's a bunch of work that we do or that's in the works. I'm going to mention a couple. One is the I2U2 work with Israel, India, the United States, UAE, that partnership. There's the IMAC MEC piece, which is this trade route, India, through the Middle East to Europe, and then of course the Quad, which is a strategic partnership: India, United States, Australia, Japan. I just think it's one of the, as we look at South Asia, Southeast Asia, particularly as it relates to China, like all of us working together economically and security wise, it's just going to be hugely important for our people, our communities, our economies, and our safety. So it's one of the most important partnerships that the United States has. And I guess the message is like, I'm all in. Like, I want to see this be successful, because it makes a big difference for us here in the United States and our economy and our national security, but also in terms of global stability and success. So, I'm all in. I know the tariffs have been very difficult. I think the trade war that Trump has created has been harmful to our economy, and it's been awful for our farmers and small businesses. The targeted tariffs make all the sense in the world, but the trade war is not working.
Okay, that's another whole different conversation and hopefully we'll get you on air again to talk about that. But Congressman Landsman, thank you so much for your time and insight, and your focus on bridging divides is really hopeful and inspirational to Americans all over, not just in Ohio, but I would say from Cincinnati to Capitol Hill. It's also a reminder that leadership begins with listening and face-to-face interactions, not just through social media. So I really appreciate your time, your work, and your presence with us today.
Always.
Thank you very much. That was Congressman Greg Landsman of Ohio's 1st District for NDTV. This is Priyanka signing off. Namaste. Thank you.